Kelly, come to my office immediately. I need to discuss a case with you.
The gruff voice from the switchboard made Kelly jump in her chair. When the director summoned her, it usually meant trouble. Kelly glanced at her pocket mirror, smoothed her hair, took a deep breath, and went to the boss's office. Mr. Brown, the recently appointed director of the consulting firm, greeted Kelly with the usual contempt in his ice-blue eyes. He was only 28, but looked younger due to his delicate physical and soft wheat-coloured curly hair. At the same time, his unexpectedly low, almost gravelly voice often gave people a shock when they first met him. Mr. Brown was always impeccably dressed, as if he represented his company to the president every day. Some employees even suspected that part of their salaries, so unexpectedly cut at the beginning of this year, reduced salaries at the start of the year, funded his wardrobe. Mr. Brown openly hated Kelly, partly because just 6 months prior, she had been an ordinary cleaner in their office. Indeed, Kelly was a unique case, a person who had risen from the very bottom to the position of deputy director. However, according to Mr. Brown, the old director had made a grave error in hiring a simple country girl for such a critical role.
I will rectify this error soon, within a week maximum,
thought the new director, while looking at his deputy with clear contempt. Good afternoon, Mr. Brown, Kelly timidly began, carefully closing the door behind her. Did you call for me?
I did, the director confirmed with a grin. Kelly, are you aware that in 5 days we will have important negotiations with Feldman Industrial? These negotiations will determine whether you can continue in your role as my deputy.
Yes, I've heard about it, the girl replied quietly in a soft voice. Of course she was aware of these negotiations. Everyone in the company knew that Feldman Industrial would never likely agree to make a deal with a firm as medium-sized as theirs. Nevertheless, it seemed as though her boss had gone to great lengths to invite representatives of this esteemed brand to the table.
Mr. Seagren describes you as a brilliant economist with remarkable diplomatic skills,
Mr. Brown continued, squinting.
It would be a poor decision on my part not to let you demonstrate your abilities in such a significant case. Moreover, your skills and actions could potentially save the entire company.
Mr. Brown delivered the final phrase with feigned drama, seemingly employing the humiliation of his unfortunate subordinate. Kelly was aware of where he was going, and it made her even more anxious. Mr. Brown, I apologize, but I believe we discussed this a week ago. I am not authorized to conduct such important negotiations without your direct presence. It would be purely disrespectful to the people of Feldman Industrial. Moreover, in the last report, I presented all the potential scenarios regarding cooperation with them as partners. With all due respect, Mr. Brown, it's too risky. If we fail, all the company's assets could suffer, which we cannot afford. Remember, we already lost 20% of our shares on the market in July. Kelly tried to reason with the director, maintaining her inherent gentleness and politeness. However, she acknowledged that a man like Mr. Brown was unlikely to be swayed by such appeals. And so it was. While the young woman was explaining the situation, the chief literally drilled her with his gaze, looking for the slightest miscalculation in every word.
Do not tell me where I should and should not take risks.
The director suddenly burst out.
Believe me, I am well aware of our share status and that part of the assets, which, by the way, you missed. Yes, don't look at me like that. You're who let it happen.
Kelly stared at Mr. Brown in disbelief. She could never have imagined, even in her worst dreams, that she would be blamed for the company's declining financial stability. She had devoted herself to improving the company's fortunes, always pursuing the most profitable and long-term contracts. The director's accusation took her by surprise. Sorry, Mr. Brown, But you are fundamentally mistaken. The incident occurred solely due to—" Kelly stammered, and Mr. Brown almost came right up to her in one big, sharp step.
"Go on, finish your sentence, Roberts," the director urged. "So, whose fault is it?"
The deputy quickly looked at her boss and bit her tongue. No matter how much she would like to voice everything she thinks about him and his skills, if she uttered a single word, as everything that had just settled down in her life would instantly come to an end. Kelly took a deep breath and said aloud, "The incident was solely due to external economic circumstances beyond our control." Mr. Brown smiled, his eyes still cold and angry.
"Well done, Roberts. You stopped in time. Kudos. Now listen to me. On Friday, you'll hold final negotiations with Feldman Industrial. If successful, you'll keep your position. I might even give you a small bonus. As you said, we're in financial difficulties, so it's important to be moderate."
What if the negotiations don't go as planned? Kelly dared to ask a question that was bold and dangerous. Mr. Brown settled into his chair, folding his hands and gazing thoughtfully at his subordinate.
"If the deal falls through, consider it the start of a long, unpaid vacation," he declared.
Kelly swallowed hard before clarifying. "So, you're saying you'll fire me?"
"This conversation is over. I have other tasks to attend to,"
Mr. Brown said sharply, and feigned interest in some documents on his desk, leaving Kelly no option but to retreat to her office in tears. She was at a loss, unsure of her next steps. Attending the crucial business meeting was her only option, but she felt like she was signing her own termination letter. That evening, as Kelly walked home from work, she found herself lost in thought. The short walk to the bus stop gave her ample time to reflect on her past and ponder her uncertain future. Kelly had grown up in a severely impoverished family. Her parents were alcoholics who drank excessively. Not a day passed without Kelly taking out whole bags of empty bottles after her parents. The girl carefully sorted the glass and plastic bottles and then handed it over to a collection point. She also helped her mother with her work as a janitor, and this allowed little Kelly to have at least some pocket money with which she could additionally buy something to eat, or save it for buying clothes to replace the worn ones. Due to constant malnutrition, Kelly was painfully thin. Kelly's mother showed little concern about feeding her daughter properly. Her father was no better. At times, he would drink so heavily that he would not hesitate to raise his hand against his wife or daughter. While he often physically abused his wife, he tried to limit what he called preventative measures against laziness to his daughter to once a month. Kelly, as much as possible, tolerated her parents' severe alcoholism and still loved them. She would tidy up their shabby apartment when her parents went out drinking with friends, and she even tried to prepare a decent meal herself. It was usually a simple dish, such as cheap pasta soup or fried potatoes. The most awful thing was that Kelly could not remember a single day when her parents were sober. Kelly's earliest memory was tainted by the stench of her father's hangovers. In one particular episode of drunken fury, he had torn apart her beloved stuffed bunny, just because the toy was in his way. Few people knew that Kelly was distressed about her family. Even when the girl was only 7 years old, she already realized that the way her family lived was not the norm in decent society.
"Kelly, take out the trash. The smell is unbearable,"
they would command.
"And get some beer for your father from the store. You have money, don't you?" "I know you do."
Her father would tease, his teeth stained from tobacco and alcohol, threatening her playfully with his index finger. "Dad, I'm just a child. They won't sell me beer," a scared Kelly would counter, struggling to hold back her tears.
"I'll whip you with a belt right now. You'll learn not to defy me."
The man tried to frighten her, but he could barely take a step without swaying, as if on a ship's deck.
"Kelly, do as your father says. Don't upset him or me,"
the mother added in a slurred voice.
"Everyone at the store knows you. Tell them it's for your mum and dad to cure a hangover. They'll understand. Here's money. That should cover it."
Kelly's mother clumsily pulled a crumpled bill from her dirty robe's pocket, then attempted to embrace her daughter, only to shower her with the stench of alcohol. "Mummy, I love you so much. Please, you and Dad need to stop drinking," the daughter pleaded, as she often did. "Other children live with parents who don't drink, right? What's wrong with us?" The woman immediately pushed the girl away with her trembling, helpless hands, as if she were a mangy puppy.
"Go away. Stop trying to heal me," she responded harshly. "You're too young to lecture your mother about the right way to live. You want parents who don't drink. Your own mother and father aren't good enough for you, are they? Ah, you little brat."
The woman raised her hand to hit the girl, but Kelly always managed to dodge, leaving her drunken mother fighting with air.
"I feed you, I clothe you, I carry heavy buckets. I clean up streets every day to feed you. And you can't go to the store for me. What an ungrateful child!"
The mother looked at Kelly as if she were not her beloved daughter, but a strange little girl she had to care for daily and who had no relation to her.
"Why did you do this to me? What have I done to you wrong?"
Kelly asked through tears, hurriedly trying to put on her jacket, torn in several places, and hole-ridden boots, the only pair she had worn outside in any weather for more than a year. Occasionally, when her mother sobered up for a short while, she always asked Kelly for forgiveness and called herself a monster. Afterward, they typically visited the second-hand clothing store. Here, Kelly's mother would buy inexpensive items for her daughter. Despite this, the girl was grateful. During these moments, her mother was at her most lucid, promising each time that her booze was in the past now, and that they would start a new, happier and sober life the next day. Kelly held on to hope each time. She yearned to believe her parents could change, and their relentless cycle of alcohol abuse would finally cease. Maybe they would even be able to celebrate her birthday for real someday, in a cafe where they would serve ice cream and sweet sodas. It is natural for a child to dream, but if other children dreamed at her age about a new doll or a construction set, then Kelly dreamed about the final recovery of her family. But in the evening, the drunk father would arrive. He worked part-time as a loader, then as a security guard at the local beer shop, and the cycle would start again. He would berate Kelly for defending her mother's right to sobriety and health. The unfortunate woman would endure this for several long, tiring hours, crying and lamenting her difficult life to her daughter. From her scattered memories, the girl inferred that before her birth, the family lived comfortably. They weren't wealthy, but they weren't destitute either. Their living standard drastically changed due to an unfortunate event. Kelly's father invested in high-risk bonds, using his apartment as collateral, and he and his wife lost everything. Soon after, a crisis occurred, leaving the couple unemployed. From this point, their gradual descent into the abyss started. Regardless of where the unfortunate spouses found themselves, they were either cheated or attempts were made to swindle them out of their money. As a result, instead of a proper salary, they were left with mere pennies, which were increasingly spent at beer and then liquor stores. Kelly's mother cared less and less about her daughter, and soon she lost all interest in her. At school, Kelly also struggled. She forever remembered the scornful looks and pointed fingers of classmates who only referred to her as the daughter of a drunkard. This was due to her appearance, and the alcohol-laden scent of her clothes. Teachers frequently sent her home from lessons earlier than scheduled. They were reluctant to address the problems burdening this young girl, finding it easier to simply ignore them by blaming Kelly for her untidiness and sending her home to clean her clothes. In such moments, Kelly wished she could disappear from shame and her sense of helplessness. Despite her careful washing of old sweaters, she feared the smell of alcohol would forever follow her, as if it had seeped into her very being. Observing her struggle, the neighbours decided to call Child Protection Services, and soon a case was filed against Kelly's parents for failure to fulfil their parental duties. In court, the couple behaved aggressively, denying any guilt and insisting that their daughter never complained of neglect. But the experienced judge quickly comprehended the situation and, as a result, they were forcefully stripped of their parental rights. Initially, Kelly's mother wept, but she eventually accepted the situation, telling Kelly that it was probably for the best, as now someone would care for her. The girl had not expected such a reaction, but she remembered very well how painful it was for her at that moment, when her mother had actually abandoned her in favour of continuing her drunken lifestyle. Kelly's father, in turn, did not even look at his daughter. It seemed that it was completely incomprehensible to him why they were detained for so long, only to be told that their lives would now become easier. Thus, 12-year-old Kelly unexpectedly found herself in an orphanage, where she had to relearn the rules of survival in a challenging society of rebellious teenagers. Initially, the girl struggled in the orphanage. The introverted and melancholic girl was frequently targeted and bullied by the older, more audacious children. Once they learned about Kelly's family, the orphans started treating her similarly to her former classmates. These young troublemakers seized every opportunity to hurt the poor girl, and she often retreated to the restroom to cry and contemplate her next move. She firmly believed that retaliating against the wicked children would ultimately make her no different from them or worse, like her parents. Kelly didn't want to lose herself entirely to aggression. After much thought, she decided to focus on her studies. Kelly realized that only education and a respected profession would provide her with a place in society and the freedom to live as she wished, not as her difficult circumstances dictated. She made a promise to herself not to let fear or weakness take over, and vowed never to reflect those who brought her into this world but robbed her of her childhood. With these thoughts in mind, young Kelly zealously embarked on her educational journey. Kelly diligently read all the books assigned by her caregivers and teachers, completing all tasks. This dedication helped her achieve good grades, bringing her great satisfaction. During this period, Kelly met one of the orphanage's teachers, Helen Bell. Childless herself, Helen decided to dedicate her life to the orphaned children, striving daily to give them love, affection, and the necessary knowledge for adulthood. Helen became a true mother figure to Kelly, who showed true care for her well-being, including what she wore and whether she had eaten. Helen never scolded her charges. Instead, in the face of unusual or unpleasant situations, she would have a discussion with the child, striving to understand their motivations. Helen's approach earned her immense respect and affection from all the orphanage children. They tried not to upset her unnecessarily. Upon Kelly's arrival at the orphanage, Helen's first act was to burn all of Kelly's old clothes. Initially, the girl was terrified by this, because they were about to take her only valuable possession, her clothes. "Don't be afraid," Helen reassured her. "I'm taking your clothes for sanitary reasons. It's not suitable for a lovely girl like you to wear such ragged clothes. Let me take them, and we'll replace them with clean, neat clothes that you'll enjoy wearing." Kelly asked in surprise, "Do you have clothes in my size? I thought everyone here wore donated clothes or hand-me-downs. The caregiver smiled kindly and slightly upset. No, not just that. While we do receive some items from charitable organisations, and some people bring clothes from their past lives, we also have brand new clothes for nice girls like you who come here to live. You'll also have your own separate shelf for your new clothes. There might not be a lot of them, but I can guarantee they're clean and no one has worn them before. Do you agree? Kelly responded with a grateful smile. In her 12 years, no one had spoken to her more kindly than this stranger. She agreed to give up her worn-out clothes, and she was given a clean new set, a skirt, tights, a few t-shirts, a warm top, underwear, and pyjamas with 2 pairs of shoes, sneakers, slippers, and high-lacing autumn boots. Kelly felt as though she was in heaven. She had never owned such beautiful and intact clothing before. The pyjamas, adorned with a cheerful pattern of little yellow chicks, particularly impressed her. "What beauty!" she exclaimed in admiration. "It's casual," chuckled Helen, blushing slightly, "but I'm glad you liked your new clothes." The woman felt a bit embarrassed. She didn't expect that Kelly would find such delight in ordinary flannel pyjamas and new tights, and her admiration indicated her distorted perception of reality. Helen pondered whether Kelly's parents had ever noticed their daughter's needs. So, Kelly found a loyal friend and mentor in her caregiver, which made her life in the orphanage much easier. Each day, she had a hot breakfast, a hearty lunch, and dinner. It was at the age of 12 that Kelly first experienced the taste of chocolate and fluffy marshmallows. In addition to her new dietary experiences, Kelly continued her education. Helen noticed her exceptional talent in math. After several one-on-one sessions, it became evident that Kelly had a natural aptitude for mathematical analysis and complex calculations. Helen said this to Kelly and recommended that she further her studies beyond the school curriculum with additional lessons and specialised literature. This would ensure a good performance at school and lay a solid foundation for her university enrolling. Helen had worked as a math teacher in the past, and she started to give Kelly additional classes 3 times a week. The girl studied with great dedication, putting her heart and soul into every equation she solved. In the end, Kelly graduated from high school with honours, and that same year she won a place at a prestigious university, despite fierce competition. Being admitted to the university on a full scholarship brought Kelly immense joy, perhaps the most she had ever felt. Thanks to her academic and social achievements, Kelly became a local celebrity, and the girl finally started the wonderful life she had dreamed of throughout her challenging childhood. Of course, she was fortunate to have in her life such not indifferent people like Helen or her neighbour, who had called the child welfare. Without them, who knows how her life would have turned out. Kelly decided to focus on her newfound happiness, choosing not to dwell on the parents who had neglected her for alcohol. During her final year at university, she found love. One day, when she had a 2-hour break between classes, she visited the local park. It was a popular spot among students, with its tree-lined paths and well-designed landscape resembling a university campus. The park was a popular spot for people to have picnics. At any time of day, it was bustling with people, making it a comfortable place to relax with a book or enjoy a coffee while listening to the birds. Kelly found a spot under a tall oak tree with a sprawling green crown, offering shade over a small, well-manicured lawn with freshly mowed grass. She spread an old plaid, which she carried in her backpack, and sat down. Then the girl pulled a book from her bag, planning to indulge in some leisure reading before returning to the main building for her last class of the day. The book was a recognised bestseller, and Kelly was immediately engrossed in the intriguing plot. Suddenly a pleasant voice called her by name. "Kelly, sorry, is this spot free?" It took Kelly a few moments to process the sound and identify its source. She raised her head and found a tall, slightly older than her young man with a cheerful smile standing in front of her. "Sorry, did you just speak to me?" Kelly asked, fluttering her eyelashes confused. "Yes, I was wondering if I could sit next to you, on the other side of the tree. It's a great spot for reading and the sun doesn't glare in the eyes," he explained. Initially, Kelly was puzzled, and then she sighed with relief. "Of course you can. This is a public place and a public tree. I doubt the tree will mind 2 people sitting under it at once." The guy chuckled at her awkward joke before introducing himself. "I'm Lance. Lance Holden. We're in the same year, just different groups. I hope you don't mind my curiosity, but I've heard so much about your exceptional abilities in mathematical analysis that I had to introduce myself." "Nice to meet you, Lance," Kelly replied politely, shaking his hand. "I'm Kelly Roberts, and I have no clue about any legends circulating the university about me." Lance smiled again, and Kelly noticed he seemed to relax, as if he had been nervous to approach her, expecting something other than normal conversation. Lance turned out to be a charming young man and a great companion. They discussed a range of topics, from board game quality to the latest episode of a popular summer series, while sitting under a tree. Kelly and Lance shared many interests, and Kelly enjoyed conversing with someone who understood her. Their friendship blossomed into a tender romance, and they found it difficult to spend a day apart. With Lance, Kelly felt she could be true, vulnerable, the person who needs protection from the world's harshness and whose love is worth preserving. Lance was equally, if not more, infatuated with Kelly. He promised to marry her after they graduated from university because they were clearly meant for each other. The only concern overshadowing their wedding plans was the behaviour of Lance's parents. As it turned out, Lance came from a wealthy and respected family. His parents had business in the construction materials industry, and they couldn't admit their son marrying a simple orphanage girl. Kelly had asked Lance not to reveal her past to his parents, fearing it would strain their relationship further. Nevertheless, Mr. Holden and Mrs. Holden somehow still got to know about the lineage of the potential daughter-in-law. Naturally, they were furious. "There will be no wedding," Lance's father exclaimed. "Do you understand? Your bride comes from a family of alcoholics. You're essentially marrying a ticking time bomb." "Dad, what are you talking about?" "Yes, Kelly didn't want to reveal to you her difficult past. Poor thing, she's experienced more hardships than you can imagine," Lance defended Kelly. "We couldn't imagine, indeed," Mrs. Holden retorted. "We never got drunk or lay drunk under the fence." "Mum, stop insulting my bride," Lance retorted, his anger flaring. "No, your mother is absolutely right," the father chimed in. "Lance, consider the kind of children you might have given such genetics. Do you understand?" Lance stubbornly shook his head. "Don't bother. You won't convince me not to marry Kelly. As soon as we receive our diplomas, we'll apply to the registry office." Lance's parents were taken aback by their son's determination. Regardless of their attempts to dissuade him or disparage his future wife, they were unsuccessful. The young couple graduated from university and began preparing for their wedding with great enthusiasm. Lance's parents had no choice but to accept their son's decision and allow him to build his own life. One day, Kelly and Lance were driving along a damp autumn highway, slick from the previous night's heavy rain. Kelly needed to visit the studio for the last wedding dress fitting. The groom had insisted on ordering a wedding dress from a top designer, which caused with some inconveniences. Particularly, Kelly had to visit his studio several times to try on the dress. That day they were rushing to complete the dress fitting before lunch. They still had to discuss the festive dinner details at the restaurant, and the chef was only available between 1 and 3 p.m. Lance had to speed up to reach the atelier as soon as possible. Suddenly, he unbuckled his belt to remove his jacket, which he was hot to sit in. And then everything happened with incredible speed, but Kelly saw everything happening as if in slow motion. Here, the car slips on a dangerous curve, and the wheels spin out at an unnatural angle with a loud squeal. Here, Lance tries hard to hold the steering wheel, but he fails, and the car is thrown somewhere beyond the road barrier. Here, everything around her begins to spin, as if she were in some infernal barrel. The top and bottom suddenly changed places, and the shards of window glass forcibly stabbed into her face as if 1,000 small, sharp needles. After that, Kelly felt a blunt blow to her head and fell into total darkness. She regained consciousness in a hospital ward. When she asked a nurse what had happened, she received a dry, terse response. "Car accident. Your fiancé is in a coma. We don't know when or if he'll wake up. Let's hope for the best." Later, an investigator from the local police department revealed that their car had skidded on a wet road. Her fiancé Lance had sustained multiple fractures and a serious head injury that caused him to fall into a deep coma. Kelly, having been strapped in with a seatbelt, suffered only minor injuries, a few bruises, a sprain and minor scrapes. Upon her discharge, Kelly went straight to Lance's ward. However, she was stopped by his parents, who looked as gloomy as storm clouds. "Hey, wait a moment, where are you going?" Mr. Holden asked Kelly, blocking her path. "You're not wanted here."
"What? It's me, Kelly, your son's bride," she responded. "I understand how hard this is for you, but Lance and I were in the accident together. I have the right to know his condition and what the doctors are saying."
Kelly fearlessly lifted her chin, a gesture she had involuntarily learned from her fiancé. But Mrs. Holden hissed at the girl.
"Can you believe her audacity, darling? She thinks she has rights. You no longer have a fiancé. If it hadn't been for you and your damned dress, none of this would have happened. Our Lance would still be well."
Mrs. Holden quietly sobbed and buried her face in her husband's chest. "Kelly, please leave us," Mr. Holden calmly requested. "Can't you see we're already suffering? Our son, your former fiancé, is now in a coma because of you. Please let us be alone for some time. When Lance wakes up, he might want to speak with you, but for now, this is pointless. Please leave us. I'm asking you nicely." With a heavy heart, Kelly followed Mr. Holden's orders. She knew she couldn't do anything at the moment. All she could do was wait for her beloved fiancé to wake up. Kelly understood the pain his family were going through, but she was genuinely offended by the way she was treated by her beloved's parents. It was obvious now that they could not fully come to terms with their son's choice. For the next few weeks, Kelly spent her time in her modest flat, pacing back and forth like a caged tiger. The girl was ready to burst into the hospital ward, desperate to see her beloved, but each time fear of encountering Lance's parents at the ward's threshold held her back. Finally, unable to bear it any longer, she went to the hospital. Instead of visiting the doctor first, Kelly headed straight to her fiancé's ward. To her surprise, the ward was empty. Turning around, she saw Lance's mother in front of her. The poor woman was as pale as death itself, and her head was covered with a black woolen shawl. "Are you satisfied now, you monster?" The woman slowly spat every word with hate. "You ruined my son, and you dare to show your face here again? Well, if you dared, then here, look, admire it."
"What happened?" Kelly asked, bewildered. "Where is Lance?" "Lance? Our Lance is dead! All because of you!" Kelly felt the floor shift beneath her. "What did you say?" she whispered. Lance is dead?
Don't even think about showing up at the funeral. If you come near us, I'll order the guards to shoot you like a rabid dog, warned Mrs. Holden. Understand? Now get out. I don't want to see you any more.
Kelly didn't argue with the grieving woman. She just slowly, like in a nightmare, made her way to the exit. She never got the opportunity to attend the funeral of her beloved. Lance's parents failed to invite her and strongly suggested she would face severe consequences if she dared to even glance at the sombre procession from a distance. Kelly spent several weeks in a severe depression. She could not eat, drink, and was tormented by constant nausea, which, as it soon turned out, was not related to the tragic events in the girl's life. Upon purchasing a pregnancy test from a nearby pharmacy, Kelly discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with both joy and fear. How could she raise a child alone? What kind of mother could she be, given her unhappy past? These questions haunted her. Later, a hospital visit revealed she was expecting twins. This news complicated her situation even more. She urgently needed to find a job to support herself during pregnancy and then her newborns. The savings she and Lance had put aside for their wedding were barely enough to last the winter, and what would happen after that was uncertain. Kelly was certain of one thing: she needed to leave the city quickly. She feared that her late fiancé's parents, when they learned of their grandchildren, might try to take them away from her. After hurriedly packing her bags, Kelly bought a bus ticket and fled to another city that same night to avoid potential harassment from the Holden family. With her remaining money, Kelly managed to rent a small but cosy apartment, and soon she made friends with the girl from the opposite apartment. Jennifer was a friendly, jovial and kind girl with whom Kelly quickly developed a rapport. She told her story, after which Jennifer respected Kelly even more. "I don't know what I would have done in your place," Jennifer said, shaking her head thoughtfully. "Your strength is truly admirable. I promise to help you in any way I can. Now you're not alone, Kelly. Together we'll raise your children, and you'll find your place in life." Kelly was grateful to Jennifer for her kindness and understanding, so she tried to hold on and not to upset her with her doubts, which, time and again, arose in Kelly's troubled soul. So, imperceptibly, almost a year flew by. Kelly gave birth to twins, Zoe and Andrew, and Jennifer helped in every possible way, acting as a second mother to the children. A little later, when Kelly recovered from childbirth and again began to work, picking up all the part-time jobs that she could, she often hired a nanny, and she was also greatly assisted by Jennifer, who understood what it was like to be a single mother with 2 children. Her mother also raised her and her sister without any support. Jennifer was working remotely as a news portal editor and only had to visit the office a few times a month, so she had no issues taking care of the children in Kelly's absence. Kelly saw her young children only twice a day, early in the morning before she left for work and late at night when she returned home. The girl was not afraid of any work. She washed floors in offices and shopping centres, worked as a dishwasher in small cafes and canteens, and even tried to give consultations on economics at the local city forum. While these jobs did not pay significantly, they allowed her to provide for herself and her children, which was her top priority. Kelly was incredibly grateful to Jennifer for helping care for the twins. When they were old enough, she enrolled them in a local kindergarten. Despite being well qualified, Kelly struggled to find work in her field of economics. Whenever potential employers learned of her young twins, they were quick to show her the door. After a couple of months of struggle, Kelly resigned herself to it and decided to get a job as a cleaner in a trading company, and then prove herself there somehow. That's how she found herself in that particular consulting firm. There she was taken without much trouble, because it was difficult to find well-performing their work cleaners, and the previous employee just retired this year. Therefore Kelly became a convenient and reliable option for them. But Kelly herself had her sights set on the sales department, hoping to become a manager eventually. At first, no one in the company took the silent but polite cleaner very seriously. Kelly came to the office every day, mopped the floor, vacuumed the carpet, dusted the office equipment, and collected and threw away all sorts of office waste. In short, she did not give the impression of a person who understood anything about economics. However, everything was decided by chance. In one of the late evenings, when most of the employees had already left their workplaces, Kelly noticed a quarterly report on the desk of the senior manager. There were many figures and calculations of all kinds, looking at which, Kelly immediately realized that there was a serious error in the documents, missing which would mean dooming the company to great financial losses. Kelly removed her rubber gloves and collected the documents from the table. She took a pen with her, too, and went to the director's office. Fortunately, he was still there, dealing with the reports of other departments.
"Oh, Kelly, what brings you here?"
the man expressed with genuine surprise.
"I thought you had finished tidying up and returned to your children."
Mr. Seagren, the director of the company, was a very kind and decent man. Kelly greatly admired his treatment of everyone in the office as equals, from senior managers to cleaning staff. He spoke respectfully to everyone, never flaunting his status, and served the firm's interests over his own. "Excuse me, Mr. Seagren," Kelly began cautiously. "I noticed a significant error in the senior manager's calculations and thought you should review it. I think I might even know how to correct it." The director frowned and asked,
"What do you know about these things? Did you go to college?"
5 years in economics, graduated with distinction," Kelly replied with a shy smile.
Mr. Seagren's eyebrows shot up in surprise. Well, if that's the case, let's see the mistake you found." From that moment, the director saw in Kelly more than just a diligent, humble cleaner. He recognized her as a brilliant economist who could solve even the most complex problems. Several times, Mr. Seagren consulted with Kelly on financial matters, and then one day he unexpectedly summoned her during work hours. Kelly was puzzled about why she was abruptly called into the director's office. She knew that she had left the office immaculately clean from the evening. During her shifts, the premises were always in perfect order. There was simply nothing to criticize her for. When Mr. Seagren called Kelly to his office that day, he thought of something else. He had long ago noticed in this skinny cleaner an executive and unquestioning employee, so he was sure that his unusual offer would give her a charge of unprecedented optimism and motivation. "Come in, Kelly, don't be afraid, have a seat." The director gestured to a chair. The young woman nervously sat down on the edge of the plush chair. "I've been watching you for a while, Kelly," Mr. Seagren began. "I must say, I am very impressed by your analytical skills. You've been working in our office for over 6 months now, and I've decided it's time for you to put your cleaning tools aside for more intellectual work. Kelly, I want to make you the head of sales, my deputy. You've helped me many times, and I believe I couldn't find a better candidate. Do you accept?" Kelly was taken aback by the director's offer. She had never considered the possibility of becoming a senior manager or a deputy director. She would be truly happy even with a sales manager position. Despite the surprise, it was a great opportunity, of course. "Mr. Seagren, your offer is unexpected," Kelly began cautiously. "But I agree, and I'm deeply grateful for your trust. Believe me, I won't let you down." "I'm sure I won't regret it, Kelly. Well done," said Mr. Seagren, shaking her hand, and let her leave early that day to prepare for her new position in their company. Mr. Seagren watched the girl leave with a contented smile. He had no doubt that he had made the right choice. That's how Kelly Roberts became the deputy director, a role she thoroughly enjoyed. It allowed her to fully apply her knowledge
and her years at university were fully rewarded in the 5 months she worked at the consulting company. Kelly's enthusiasm and skills led to remarkable sales figures in a short period. Everyone was pleased with Kelly's economic strategy, so she felt secure in her new position. The results of her work spoke for themselves. It seemed as though Kelly's life was improving. However, the unsuspecting mother of twins didn't realize that this was just the beginning of another series of misfortunes, seemingly sent by fate to test her character's strength. A critical moment came when Mr. Seagren got seriously ill due to his age, and he was abruptly replaced by a young and audacious dandy, Anthony Mr. Brown. As a distant relative of one of the company's co-founders, he behaved like a king at the head office. He was not shy about squandering the budget. If any employee dared to challenge their actions, they were promptly dismissed and replaced with someone more compliant. From the first day of their acquaintance, Kelly was disliked by Mr. Brown. He disliked having a deputy who was well versed in finance and understood all that he wrote in the reports, which were aimed to confuse his colleagues on the board and hide the company's extravagant spending. More than once, Kelly pointed out to him the supposedly accidental mistakes in the figures, and it pissed the young director off to no end. Learning that Kelly had risen to the position of deputy from being a cleaner, he decided to get rid of her. If not physically, then emotionally, he thought, beginning to humiliate her at every turn and highlighting her less than noble professional journey. After a failure with forthcoming negotiation, he was certain that he could finally dismiss Kelly Roberts. Meanwhile, Kelly sat in her office, continuing to sob bitterly. She realized that Mr. Brown effectively ended her career by assigning her to negotiate with Feldman Industrial. The representatives of this company were renowned for their uncompromising, distrustful, and almost obsessive selectivity in choosing business partners. Kelly was almost certain she would not be able to strike a deal with Feldman Industrial. That's why she prepared herself mentally to pack up her belongings the following day. Being fired seemed inevitable. Regardless, she still had to attend the meeting at the upscale restaurant, located in the city centre. Barely managing to prepare herself and order snacks and drinks, she watched as the restaurant doors opened and the entire delegation entered. The girl greeted the company representatives and invited them to sit. Their potential partners from Feldman Industrial exuded an air of danger and business savvy, making Kelly feel as if she were facing a pack of wolves. After introducing themselves, they immediately apologized for the absence of one of the key representatives of the company, but immediately assured that he was delayed for critical reasons and should join them soon. Even though the beginning of the negotiations turned out to be quite nervous and tense, Kelly was able to provide the business partners with a maximum of useful information about their company, thanks to which the conversation reached a new, much more constructive level. In the middle of the negotiations, a late member of Feldman Industries entered the restaurant and made his way to the table where the negotiations were taking place. As he approached, he greeted everyone, and when Kelly saw his face, it seemed to her that the air in her lungs instantly ran out. The astonished look in Lance's eyes suggested he also recognized Kelly as his once intended bride. After concluding their business negotiations, which, incidentally, proved beneficial for both parties, and waiting for their partners to depart, Kelly and Lance embarked on a difficult conversation. "Kelly, why did you leave? Why did you abandon me?" Lance asked with bitterness. "I didn't leave you," Kelly replied sadly. "Your parents told me you were dead. They forbade me from attending the funeral." Overwhelmed by emotion, Kelly broke into tears, hiding her face from the prying eyes of the restaurant patrons. Oh my goodness, what a black, vile lie!
Lance exclaimed angrily, then gently wrapped his arm around Kelly's shoulders. "If you'll allow me, I'll never let you go again." All Kelly could do was nod in agreement, still trying to control her flood of tears. It was as if the woman's heart had suddenly been turned inside out, revealing to the world all the stitches that still connected its broken parts to each other. Soon it was revealed that Lance's parents had deceived him, labelling his fiancée as a cheater and defaming her to the young man, who was barely recovered from a coma. They had claimed that Kelly had left him for a more promising suitor, and Lance in his youthful naivety had believed them. Afterward, his family had found a bride for him that they believed would meet the elite family standards. However, this marriage was short-lived, and the couple soon divorced. It's challenging to express the emotions Lance and Kelly felt when their hearts were reunited, but one thing was certain: nothing could separate them now. When Kelly informed Lance that their twins were waiting for him at home, Lance was surprised and overjoyed. "Twins! My God! I have children!" he exclaimed joyfully, kissing his beloved. Kelly just smiled, at a loss for words. She resigned from the consulting company and its avaricious director right after she returned from the business negotiations. Soon after her leaving, they started facing heavy losses. Eventually, the company went bankrupt. Mr. Brown was caught bribing a major regional official, which led to a serious prison sentence. As for Kelly, she and her husband, yes, they finally got married, are raising their children and managing their new business in the production of children's furniture. Lance's parents, seeing their son's happiness and meeting their grandchildren, realised their mistakes. They apologised and were forgiven. Now the big family gathered as a friendly group for all family holidays.